You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
Veteran, etc. This episode is One-Dimensional Veteran. I'm spinning this out of the book by Herbert Marcuse, The One-Dimensional Man. Why am I connect the two? Well, I was recently watching The Hurt Locker, the 2008 movie that won the Academy Award, a film created by Kathryn, Bigelow, a film that really didn't get the rave reviews that it should have gotten, in my opinion. Why do I say this? I say this because with The Hurt Locker, we have Sergeant First Class William James. And in the character, William James, played by phenomenal actor Jeremy Renner, we have the best of the best in the military. At least that's what's portrayed in the movie. And yet, in some ways, the best is in some ways enslaved. How do I mean this to be true? No matter how many IEDs, no matter how many explosions this sergeant experiences, Sergeant First Class James, no matter how many times he risks his life, the system continues to put him forward. And in this, he becomes the one-dimensional man. It is this passive enslavement that he has no trace of the inner conflicts. In other words, he becomes numbed out, and you can tell in a scene in that movie where in The Hurt Locker, towards the end, he's walking with his family into a supermarket, and he's just looking and staring at all the different foods and all the availability and all the consumption available to him. And what is he thinking? I wonder. I imagine that he's thinking about the idea of having options, but being trapped in his state. And his state is one of a militarized mind, body, and soul. Let me distinguish that between that state and a military state of mind. So there's the militarized state of mind, body, and soul in conflict with the military state of mind and soul. The former, the militarized mind, in my view, is one that can only look at orders and only look at yellow ribbons and can only see the headlines on Fox News, even on CNN, even on News Nation, glorifying deployment outside of what it just is. And that's a deployment, a military deployment in cooperation to American foreign policy. It's important for me to mention this because I'm finding now more and more vets participating outside of the veteran terrain in sharing their voices. And that's important. At the same time, I question, is it an authentic voice? I'm not saying that these veterans have lies to share. Maybe some do. But I would say that most veterans now publicly engaging these different civilian circles in mass media, well, it's more an issue of having somewhat of a symbiotic relationship with that media source. And it's happened to me. We can all get locked into that type of vacuum because the media is so huge and the consumerism attached to the media is so huge. Am I against the system of media? No. Am I against the system of consumerism? No. But I do feel that having a certain awareness in engaging consumerism and engaging not just the consumerism tied to goods and spending, but the consumerism tied to media consumption and media cooperation. You see, when you put yourself out there, you put yourself out there. At the same time, recognize that the platform you're on is being managed with a particular agenda. It's not a conspiracy, it's just an agenda. And that agenda is to generate more funding, more advertising dollars. By being aware of these circumstances, one can better manage their day-to-day lives as well as that veteran multi-dimensional reality. I mention all this because when I first started this podcast, I brought up the book, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, a book written by Sloan Wilson in 1955. And in 1956, it became a popular movie. Now, Herbert Marcuse's controversial book, One Dimensional Man, was written in 1964. And so when folks try to denounce Marcuse's book, I'm thinking Sloan Wilson was saying the same things that Marcuse was saying, but in a narrative story about an advertising executive who served in war, World War II, and returned and became one-dimensional and had to live a one-dimensional life with his family, while inside he wanted so many different things, and yet, due to consumerism, he was trapped. Now, this narrative, this story, this fictional story that has some non-fictional aspects to it is quite revolutionary. Again, it was written, the book written in 1955, Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. It's even overtly questioning in such a static society the roles people play in society. And there's some connection with Jeremy Renner as this Sergeant First Class William James has a different type of suit, and much like the Gray Flannel Suit, it's representative of fending off through armor, some type of protection. The Gray Flannel Suit is a protection to promote stability. The green padded suit Jeremy Renner wears in his movie, well, that's a different type of protective armor. Both try to fend off what is destroying the human being inside of the armor. And these are parallels. These are parallels as veterans that we can be more aware of each and every day. If you're a veteran, what type of armor do you have that keeps you one-dimensional?
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out cominghomewell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.